Hey, hi, hello. Welcome. I hope you're all right. If you're watching the YouTube video, welcome to my home. You can see Toro on the couch behind me. He just got comfortable, so hopefully there's minimum rustling from him, but he's pretty cute, so we can make an exception for his noise. If you're also on video, actually, if you're on audio as well, you're probably hearing a big upgrade. My love got me a incredible microphone. He said all the podcasters have it, all the real podcasters have it, which is so flattering. And I what was really sweet is that when he gave it to me, he's like, "I believe in you. I love what you're doing," and it's just so supportive. So shout out to him. Shout out to my love for the equipment for the upgrade, helping you guys enjoy this experience better. Um, So, yes, let's hop into it. You see the title of today's episode, which is How to Spot and Manage Difficult People. And so, I came to this topic after having quite a few conversations with people, and my clients are going through it. Several of my clients have difficult people in their lives. And of course, it makes relationships difficult because difficult people make difficult relationships. It's as if relationships are easy. You know what I mean? So navigating difficult people can be incredibly challenging. And so my intention in this podcast is to help you spot difficult people, right? And then how to just be around them. Because let's face it, ignoring them isn't always an option. We sometimes have forced interactions, and these can come up in a lot of ways. It can be a partner that you're married to, it can be a family member, it could be in a family member, it could be like your parent, your sibling, it could even be your own child, like a functioning adult, difficult person. Um, it can be a boss, a coworker, people that you can't escape essentially. And so I don't want you to feel like you're trapped, and it can absolutely feel like that. But what we're going to talk about and go over in the beginning are the red flags of a difficult person. How do you know when you're engaging with a difficult person outside of just having constant challenges? There's quite a few telltale signs that you're that you're dealing with a difficult person. And one main theme I see, which I want you to just really breathe into this episode, if it starts to trigger you, we're going to talk about abuse. I'm going to share my experiences with abusive people and what was said to me, how they treated me. So, if you find yourself maybe experiencing a little tightness in your chest and some discomfort, bring some soothing things with you in this podcast. Obviously, don't feel like you can't stop it and come back to it later. That's what a podcast is for. So, I just want to go into this and advise you to be comfortable, have some hot tea or coffee near you, whatever you need for comfort, because sometimes recognizing that you're being abused is uncomfortable. But it also can be relieving at the same time, given that there's language for this and there are tactics that people use that are abusive tactics. And sometimes you might be in a relationship with a person that is difficult and an abuser, and you're like, oh my God, I could never put my finger on it, but this is exactly what's happening. And I thought I was going crazy. And so I want to decrease the amount of crazy you think you are in this episode. That's my intention. Hopefully that translates. So, um, we're going to keep it real, right? Some people are difficult. Some people are shitty. Some people are just impossible to be around. And again, if you're in a relationship, whether forced or whatever, and sometimes we choose to stay in relationship with people like that, and that's okay. There's a lot of reasons why people stay in marriages or in jobs when they have bosses and coworkers that are very intolerable. Let's not judge that. Let's not be too quick to assume everybody has the ability to get out of those situations, or even if they can, that they want to. And so your choice to stay is absolutely your choice. When you're, excuse me while I apply chapstick, when you're with difficult people, there are tools and techniques, and I'm going to give those to you today. So, a lot of what I see is narcissism, and I don't mean the pop culture narcissism that is really like, oh, you're toxic, you know. Um, no, I actually mean like clinical narcissism. I see a lot of it. It's pervasive. It's very interesting to me. Well, I also dated one. I married one. So, we're no longer married, thank God, but it was incredible. It's one of those things where unless you have been through it, it's incredibly challenging to understand or be understood by other people that have been through it. People can certainly listen and do their best to empathize, but there's something that hits different when you're talking to another victim of narcissistic abuse because there's this survivor connection of like, holy shit, like we went through this, we're incredible. Um, and you just know how confusing it is. And you don't, there's less blaming and less shaming and less um I would say more acceptance is what I'm trying to say about how you got into that situation and how long it may have taken you to get out and why you went back 100 times and all the things. Because people on the outside, again, who've never experienced it, might kind of cock their head to the side and be like, why didn't you just leave? Or, oh, okay, that's interesting, and listen, but they don't really get it. Well, there's a lot that happens in the brain and body connection when you are in an abusive relationship or when you're constantly dealing with difficult people. You learn typically how to numb out. You have amnesia, which is forgetting all the crappy things that they did and instead just really honing in on the good moments, which are usually few and far between. But because you're in that place of such desperation to find something good, you really focus on it and like never let it go. So, difficult people are difficult people. We can't always get away with them. And narcissism is pervasive. So, I'm going to lean into this with a full on DSM description of a narcissist. And that may startle some of you, but I think if anything, it's going to shed a lot of light on people that you are engaging with. And now, narcissism isn't the only personality disorder out there. There are quite a few. However, narcissism, I find, tends to be the most, yeah, I guess pervasive is the word. Most popular, like in the worst way. So let's get into it. The diagnostic criteria for NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, and this has to be pervasive. This has to be a consistent pattern in their life in every setting. So in their family, in their work, in their hobbies, like their behavior has to be cutting across all sectors of life, right? So they have grandiosity. And this is a sense of self-importance. So this can be exaggerating achievements and talents, expects to be recognized as superior without actually achieving what they say they should. So that's really interesting, and I'm sure that you're already like, oh my God, I know someone. um, is preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited power, success, brilliance, beauty, or ideal love. The ideal love is interesting because when we become in a relationship with these people, part of their patterning is to idealize and then they will devalue and then they will discard. And we're going to go further in detail about that. Um, but the idealization is interesting for sure. So, preoccupied with fantasies, grandiose as fuck, believes that they are special and that they are unique and that they can only be understood or associated with special or high status people or institutions. And I think that's also really fascinating. They require excessive admiration. And I know when I work with clients, when we talk about getting validation and admiration, it's not uncommon for me to see my clients kind of shying away from recognizing that they want admiration and validation because they fear that they're going to be like their abuser a lot of times, or that they're going to fall into this, what I think is pseudo narcissism, this again, the pop culture narcissism, as if, wanting validation and having a healthy sense of yourself is bad. And it's not. We all want admiration and we all want validation. So that's not a problem. But what it says here is excessive admiration and validation. So you can think about it as like a little kid who at every turn they're like, Mommy, look at me, Daddy, look at me, look what I've done, da 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 da. And it's just sort of constant. And it's also for bare minimum things like, cool, you fucking cleaned the couch. Like, that's exactly what I asked you to do. So thanks for doing it. Like, you don't always have to receive admiration and this, oh my God, you're so amazing for doing what you're asked to do or contributing, right? Um, a sense of entitlement. So, unreasonable expectations of especially favorable treatment or automatic compliance with his or her expectations. I'm sure you've met people like that. Is intrapersonally explosive. So they take advantage of others to achieve his or her own ends. This this is rewarded actually in America. This type of, I'm sorry, I said ex explosive and I meant to say exploitive. I'm sure that now makes better sense to anybody watching and listening. Exploitive. So this behavior is rewarded in corporate America, to just step all over other people in order to get to the top. And so some of our systems at play, I don't want to say breed narcissism. I don't know if that's accurate, but they perpetuate narcissistic tendencies and certainly give narcissists a warm welcome. They're like, come be here. Lacking empathy is unwilling to recognize or identify with the feelings and needs of other people. These people are scary. People who don't want to listen. And I know that we all have our triggers and we have times where we can't listen, or there are times where we don't want to hear what other people have to say. And that doesn't make us a narcissist. It just makes us having a window of tolerance that is, you know, um, being challenged at that moment. And that's okay because we're human, we're not perfect. But this person is unwilling, meaning that they don't ever turn around to say, well, let me hear your side. Let me understand where you're coming from. It's just like constantly moving forward, not caring and not wanting to care. So they're often envious of other people and they believe that other people are envious of him or her. Interesting. There's a little bit of paranoia there. I've read for quite a few paranoid clients that really believe that they're the subject of everyone's conversation. And that because they're so amazing, everybody must be talking about them and whispering behind their back. And I'm like, the cards show me that they really aren't thinking about you. And they're like, no, your cards must be wrong. And I'm like, okay, well, cool. For those people, there's no point in arguing or doing anything. Um, I will shift the conversation sometimes, but if they need to hear what they want to hear, they're going to hear whatever they need to hear. You know what I mean? Like I could say something and they could hear something completely different. So, whatever. And then shows arrogance, haughty behaviors, or attitude. So, again, just having this air of I'm better than you, I am superior, other people are less than, which we know isn't true. Other people are just other people. Um, and I think that this is interesting too, because again, I find that my clients who are naturally competitive don't want to admit that they're competitive, or they kind of shine down their competitive nature. And I'm like, it's okay to be competitive. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just, what lines are you drawing in the sand that you're not going to step all over other people in order to win, and that you don't think you're better than people because you have, right? So I'm given a combination of these things. Um, excuse me. So, in order to be diagnosed with NPD, we have to have a lot of evidence for that. So, just even given this list of behavioral patterns doesn't necessarily mean that somebody is a narcissist, but they need to have five or more on that list of nine things that we went over in order to qualify to be a narcissist. So, you can imagine that dealing with anybody that has a lack of empathy and has no problem exploiting you, humiliating you in order to get to the top is a difficult person. And again, not everybody you're talking to and in relationship with is a narcissist. So I have to say that because it's true. It's impossible that everybody would be, but it's also possible that quite a few people, let's say, are high on the narcissistic traits without qualifying them as a narcissist. And again, I want to just bow to how you might be feeling in this moment. I'm doing my best to be sensitive. When I first discovered that my ex husband was high on these traits, I felt sadness and I felt relief. I felt sadness because I knew that it would never change. And then I felt relief because I was like, well, there's some language here. There's something that's real, right? There's evidence, and I'm not crazy. I'm not trying to make sense of this. It's like, okay, here's the answers. This person has a personality disorder. So it's like, all right, cool, awesome. Um, and this is where we get again real. People like this rarely change. And I think that people really hate hearing that because we collectively hope that the person will change because we desire a certain type of relationship with them, or we want our life to be easier if this person is constantly creating pain. And I want to validate that you deserve easier experiences. You know, you deserve pain free experiences with people or, minimal pain and with responsible people who love you and that can repair after damage is done. However, difficult people aren't going to do that. And so, what we step into as we go further into this podcast episode is radical acceptance. We're going to learn how to be experts at that. It's extremely uncomfortable. I don't like it when I have to do it. So I hope that you have permission I hope you're giving yourself permission to not like it. You don't have to like it at all. But you do have to do it in order for this to be easier on your mental health and well-being. Okay. Um, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I wish it could be better, but not everything is easy. So one main question I get is like, why are people like this? And until they have the real clarity that they're a difficult person, they're like, well, what if I just did this? It could be better. What if I did that? It could be easier. If I reason with them this way, then they'll understand. If I write a letter with all the perfect phrases, then they'll get it. If I perfectly craft this proposal, then they'll see me as like the winner, the good enough person, or whatever. And look, sis, it's not going to happen. You need to realize that there's no amount of self sabotaging you can do in order to appease this person. I mean, their expectations are so incredibly high that nobody can meet them. And really, that's a reflection of their internal state. I mean, they have so much self loathing and self hatred and so much shame, and they don't really feel that, right? They're not available to reflect on how what they're feeling. And that's why they behave the way they do, right? They're just a walking manifestation of their own chaos. And they wreak havoc on other people's lives because they're internally like in a state of constant turmoil again, but they're not aware of it. So here we have this person who shows up that can have really good moments with you, right? I'm not saying that a difficult person doesn't also have positive attributes because they do, they typically do. And that's also where we, as the person in relationship with a difficult person, becomes confused because we see that they can sometimes be caring, that they can sometimes listen, that they can sometimes even apply what you say when you put up a certain boundary. Um, and then we think, well, God, they can go further, right? I've seen it. I believe it. It happened that one time 7 years ago. Nope. Let it go. Let it go. Really just recognize that this person isn't going to change. And it's you that has to change. And please uh, just breathe into that. I'm going to give you the tools that you can use to change because it's the radical acceptance that happens on your side over and over and over again that allows this dynamic to affect you less, right? And that's ultimately what I want for you. So, we're going to define difficult. I mean, I think difficult is exactly what we described in those personality traits, which are people that don't listen, they have no empathy, they don't care about what they do and how they impact other people. That tends to be the collective definition of a difficult person. Um, so let's ask the question less about why they're the way they are. It's a combination of how they were raised and how their brain is. Okay. To just simplify it, nature and nurture have combined in a way that have created a difficult person. So there it is. We went over the DSM definition. So now I'm going to go over some things called, what am I going to call these? I don't even know. This is just shit that narcissistic people do. This is the shit that difficult people do. That's what I'm going to call this section of the podcast. These are tactics that difficult people will often use. They are a combination of conscious and subconscious. If a person is trying to get to the top, you staying sad and confused and disoriented is a great way for them to get there because you're just spinning in circles like a dog chasing its tail and they're just walking up the fucking steps, getting the trophy. So, hovering, we're going to go over this. Hovering is something that a lot of difficult people will do to get you sucked back in. And this is saying the thing that you need to hear at the perfect time in order for you to not walk away completely, or in order for you to keep getting into the conversation and focused on what they're saying and defending yourself, which is giving them the energy they need to keep going. Um, think about these people as energy vampires. A lot of what I say you're going to realize has stolen your energy in the past. But when you have this awareness, you don't have to keep giving your energy over to this because you start to recognize these behavioral tactics for what they are. They're tactics to keep you roped in to their energy and supplying them the energy that they need to sustain themselves. Hovering, yeah. So exactly what it sounds like. It gets you sucked back in. I caution quite a few of my clients when dealing with difficult people. I caution them about how they share what they need with difficult people. And here's why. If you tell a difficult person, a manipulative person, but what I need from you is X, Y, and Z, and it's not necessarily a behavioral change, it's words, they're going to use it against you in the hovering tactic. They're going to say, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. I didn't mean to hurt you. And maybe they've never said it before. So it's the first time. And you're like, oh my God, they've changed. You start to believe that based on words alone. Um, you're like, finally, they've said what I've needed them to say all these years or all this time or whatever. And honestly, even the first 10 times, you can sort of take that hovering tactic and get sucked back in and be like, oh my God, you said it and great. And then you're all of a sudden you're back in. Um, so I caution a lot of my clients to not actually tell them because here's the thing, in a healthy relationship, after there's been damage, there's the repair. And you would typically turn to your person, whoever you're in relationship with, and say, this is what I need to hear from you to go forward, right? This is what I need to hear from you um, when I'm maybe re-triggered again because I'm feeling slightly sensitive, right? And look a little vulnerable right now. And your kind, caring, compassionate partner would say, oh my God, of course. Yes, I will do my best to give that to you. But here's the thing, you can identify a difficult person because you're usually begging for that. You're usually having to say, this is what I need, this is what I need, this is what I need over and again. And it's like you're exhausted. That's different. Okay. The exhaustion is a straight up sign you're dealing with a difficult person versus a person who, you're navigating some tough spaces with, emotional spaces. So I advise my clients not to actually give away too much because the people who are going to harm you are going to take those words again to get what they need. Okay. The exploitation and not really change. So that's hovering. Love bombing. This is extremely popular. This is something I see a lot in new relationships, not just romantic relationships, but in work relationships where there's promises of all these things. So it's a little more future faking, but there's grand gestures. I think that's usually the telltale sign of love bombing. Um, And I'll be really clear with you guys. When I was first dating my ex-husband, there was a lot of that. There was a lot of trips and there was a lot of gifts. And so you get so caught up in the fantasy. And I think what happens within our cultural narrative is we crave this overly romantic connection, right? Because we're like, life is a Disney movie, or the Disney movie is finally happening. I'm having my princess moment or whatever. And so then we're vulnerable. Like we're just completely vulnerable. I'm going to say that I was. And so what's happening in the love bombing phase is that you're not really paying attention to their behavior. The mask is still totally on and you're so excited and you're in a state of excitement, so your nervous system is elevated, um and you stay in that constant state of elevation, and then you start to bond from that place, like from those grand gestures, and you're like, oh my God, this is amazing, da da da. And there's a difference between a nice person who's kind and does romantic things versus a person who is just really trying to get you hooked because they're such a good person. And I say that in quotes for those of you that are off camera, because good people don't need to show that. I don't want to say that. How can I say this? Good people show that they're good people with other actions outside of grand gestures. It's caring moments of affection. It's actually the little things repeatedly that show you that they're a good person. It's not how many trips they can take you on quickly. It's not how many flowers they can buy you. It's not how much jewelry they can afford. And I fell into the whole jewelry trips shit, concerts and all the things. And it was like constant, it was like every couple of months there was an out of country trip booked, and trips, I don't know. It was overwhelming, to be honest with you. But I was naive. I really didn't know what I know now. So hopefully this helps you guys. The love bombing can be overwhelming. And sometimes your inner system might even say that. And if that's happening, I really encourage you to take a step back and don't be afraid to take things slow. Slow is sexy, you guys. Slow is sexy. But anyway, grand gestures, overly romantic. It can feel like this space where you're like, it's finally happening. This is incredible. But then you're also feeling like you don't really have a moment to breathe. Because I know there's so much happening. And unfortunately, people on the outside can be like really envious of you. And they're like, oh my God, he's so amazing, blah, blah, blah. And then you start to think about how incredible this person really is because of their gestures. And it's confusing. It's really confusing. Gaslighting, super popular. I think society as a whole gaslights us, and then we gaslight ourselves. We're often gaslit as children, which is fucking infuriating, but here we are. Gaslighting happens in every relationship. Okay. There's no like only this type has gaslighting. Nah, it's everything. Um, this just invalidates your feelings and your reality. It makes you feel like your needs do not matter and are less than to the other person or to whatever's happening. Um, what also happens in gaslighting is that you learn how to stop saying certain things. So, because your needs over time become less important, you learn how to not say your needs. So that way you avoid um, more gaslit, being gaslit. Like you, because you learn your needs are so unimportant. You're like, why even bring them up at all? And so there's a lot of silence, and you don't want to have more neglect and abuse happen on top of neglect and abuse, which is fascinating in the worst way. Um, but I was actually just talking about this with a client. So there's this sort of overt gaslighting that happens, right? And it's like, oh my God, why? Yeah, that's not, why do you feel that way? That's not important. And here's the thing, you might have a partner. So I want you to check in with your triggers, right? You might have a partner that says, like, why do you feel that way? And there's this genuine curiosity to empathize and to understand, well, how are you arriving to your feelings? What's historically what's happening in your body to help to make you feel this way? I'm curious. I want to know. And that's what we want. Like we want a partner who's going to lean in and genuinely understand our feelings. Um and then there's this other accusatory of like why do you feel that way? You shouldn't feel that way. And I'm going to give you some really clear examples of how I was gaslit by my ex-husband. When I was in grad school to do exactly what I'm doing now, getting my master's in clinical social work to help people, he'd be like, why does it take you so long to write a paper? It doesn't take other people that long. Y'all, I don't know if you've been to grad school, but that shit is hard as fuck. And I don't know if you've ever had to learn a new language when you're in grad school. When you're learning psychology and you're learning mental health, there is a whole other language that you learn. And it's an incredible experience, but it's not one that I found myself capable of jumping into overnight and just absorbing, right? And so that's me. That was my experience. It took time. And like, so what? And because my partner wanted me to be available for his agenda and his needs, while I was also a full-time grad student, um, what I was doing and my own feelings and experience became lesser than his belief that I should prioritize him and what the fuck he wanted to do. So a lot of this, you shouldn't be having a hard time. This should be easier for you. Um, I have friends that are in, business school and it didn't take them this long, and all the things that make you feel like shit, that make you question if there's something wrong with you and if the way you're feeling is true, and you begin to gaslight your fucking self. It's crazy making, really it is, and it's really sad, and I really hope it if I could change anything, it would be like no more gaslighting, like a magic wand to just stop this bullshit. um anyway, you question your own reality after a period of time. And so the other more covert gaslighting is that you might bring up how you're feeling and the person is just dismissive. And so over time, you begin to recognize that you're not going to get your needs met from this person, right? There's no inquiry, genuine inquiry of why you feel that way. There's no validation. There's no support emotionally. Certainly, there's no fucking caretaking of your needs. So you learn to just self silence, and then you become quiet as if a person that has no needs, which is not true, but it's what you learn. And so the covert gaslighting becomes you just avoid certain topics because you don't want to repeat, you don't want to have that wound prodded essentially, right? Because if you bring it up and you're searching and you're wanting and you're wishing and you're hoping, and then you're just left standing there feeling like shit, It's easier to feel like shit on your own than to maybe open up a little bit and hope. Um, it just adds salt to the wound that's already there, you know? So yeah, you learn how to just be quiet. Scapegoating. Okay, so this is one that happens quite often. There's a gnat. For those of you on video, you're going to see me swiping at it. It's coming in my direction and I don't appreciate it. Scapegoating. You are a punching bag. Let me just say that. That's the best way I can explain it. They're a bully. You're the punching bag. You become the one that gets all of the abuse, and it could be physical, emotional, mental, all of it, sexual, whatever. It's all shitty, and it happens, and it's sometimes a combination of all the things. But yeah, the scapegoat. And this happens in family structures, this happens in romantic relationships. Obviously, bullies need somebody to blame, they need a victim, they wouldn't be a bully. And they choose us, the ones who are here today, showing up and listening to this podcast episode. But that is a tactic of a difficult person. You become the one that they aim their really crappy energy to. Future faking. I know that everyone in here has probably been a victim of this. Future faking, telling you they'll do something and they won't. This happens in workplaces as well. Boss is going to tell you, keep working hard. In 6 months, you'll get a raise. 6 months comes and they're like, oh my God, we did budget cuts. Sorry. But there's a new set of paperwork on your desk. So keep up the good work. Yep. Future faking can also be as simple as, I'm going to call you in the morning, and then they don't. And so repeatedly, like, because everybody has something that happens. I mean, budget cuts do happen. I'm not explaining away shitty workplace treatment at all. But here's what I'm going to say. Sometimes people are like, I'm going to call you back, and then they don't. But there should also be an apology and a repair after the mistake has been made, right? We would hope, we would hope. But the future faking is what repeatedly happens without a repair. So there's no change in behavior. There's just this constant, like, I'm going to show up, I'm going to be there. And then they don't. That person doesn't. So that's future faking, telling you they're going to do something and then just not doing it. And you need to ask yourself how many times you're going to allow that to happen in your life. You need to ask yourself, how many times are you going to believe a person that's clearly lying to your face, right? And why are you believing them? It's going to be important for you to really sit with that and do some work. Mirroring. So this is scary. That mirroring is a reason why I advise my clients who are in new relationships, friends, romantic. It could even be like new family members coming in. Let's say you have a sister and they get married and their partner, it's like getting to know everybody in the family or whatever. Mirroring is when a person looks like they see you, but they're really not. What they're doing is they are data mining. And I tell people not to give up a lot of information up front. I'm a person, and I know I'm recording this podcast, so it might be like kind of strange, but in my personal relationships, I go a lot more in depth, about my life and my experiences, and I allow myself to be even much more vulnerable than I do here. Um, and it takes me a while to get there. I don't talk about certain things until I feel very safe with a person because I've had mirroring happen to me. And in this stage of data gathering, what is happening is they're storing the other person, the difficult person, is storing all of the information that you're sharing in the back of their mind. And they're going to weaponize it against you later. So when I was first dating my ex-husband, I shared a lot of things. And later, all of those things became uh, basically, I see it as like I had all these little targets all over me, and he had the arrow and would just go and just right into the center of that target, just hit every trigger I had, every insecurity, sensitivity, weakness, all became exploited and used against me. And at one point, I'll never forget this. He was like, "You're gonna fuck up all of your clients. You're gonna ruin everybody that you work with. You're gonna get fired. You're crazy. You shouldn't be supporting people because you're insane." And I know that those things are not true, but to hear them from a person that you're married to and that supposedly loves you is just incredibly destabilizing. And I think that word really describes what happens when you're experiencing all of these tactics, but definitely in the mirroring, because they're getting well, what's happening is they're giving you all this attention. They're like leaning in a way that looks empathetic. And this is why it's really scary, you know. But this is also why I say we need to be mindful of how much we tell people and when we tell them. Not everybody deserves you. Not everybody deserves you to see you. Not everybody deserves your vulnerability. Not everybody deserves your compassion and your kindness. And that can be kind of strange to hear from somebody who is in mental health and also spiritual, but it's a fucking fact. Like, difficult people don't deserve your kindness. They really don't. And I'm going to go into explaining why that is, you know, and it's true that sometimes your kindness can be your weakness. And if you're overly empathetic, you are completely vulnerable to being taken advantage of. And I don't want that for you. I want you to be strong and I want you to cope well with difficult people. And so, again, part of the strategy here is to be able to recognize mirroring. And it often happens when they're asking you a lot of questions. Tell me about your relationship with your mom. And what's unfortunate is that if you're doing this personal work of spirituality and mental health, you want to hear that. You want someone to ask you that question because you want to share the information. You want to be seen, heard, and recognized. And I'm telling you, find a therapist, okay? Find somebody who can process. Don't make that be a random stranger that you're getting to know. It's unsafe, you guys. It really is. Until trust has been established, until you really understand this person, you don't owe them your life story. You don't owe them your heart. You don't owe them your vulnerability. You just fucking don't. Like, I will die on that hill. And it can be a trap. And because again, you might be in a place of being vulnerable and you've never had anyone ask you that. You're like, oh my God, I finally get to share. I get to tell this and that and da da da. And then it's weaponized against you, right? That's why you're just like your mom, or that's why your mom did that when you were little. It's literally phrases like that have been said to me, um, like that I was asking for the abuse, you know. Um, it's painful. Like, it's really painful. So just recognize that these people aren't really seeing you, they're mirroring. They act as if they are empathizing and they're not. They're gathering data. Okay, now we move into baiting. Baiting is where they're going to take the information that they get from you and they're going to criticize you, they're going to accuse you, they're going to um they're going to use the people that you care about so they could weaponize your kiddos against you, your other family members, passions of yours. Again, like going back to the point, my ex-husband saying like, you're going to fuck up all your clients. Like, he knew that I cared about what I do. And I'm really passionate about this work. And that passion was very evident to him. And that became a place to where I could be baited because I cared. So then I became emotionally reactive, which is exactly that's what the point of baiting is. It's to get you in a place where you're emotionally reactive. And then they're like, ha ha, ha ha, look at you. I win. You can't keep your cool. You're insane. Look at how you're reacting. And I'm not sure I think some of you are probably sighing and being like, holy shit. Yeah. Oh my God, that happens. Yep. Because they're going to turn around and they're going to be like, look at how crazy you are. Look at how you have these emotions, which, I mean, if you've been listening to this podcast long enough, you know that I'm going to normalize any and all emotion because it's just an emotion. So, of course, you're pushed to a limit. And of course, you have a reaction. Healthy people are going to boundary test to a degree. It's not something that's inherently negative or bad. They're gonna not know your limits, and at some point they're gonna trigger you, and you're gonna be like, "Oh my God, I'm triggered," and they're gonna be like, "Oh my God, I'm sorry," and then you're gonna repair. But these people that are difficult, they're not looking to repair. They want to find that edge, and they want to push you over every fucking time, and that's their intention, so that they can turn around and be like, "Yeah, I don't. Are you okay? I'm just worried about you. Your reaction seems unhinged." And then you're like, "Oh my God." And you just go further into the crazy making, like the internal crazy making. Flying monkeys. This happens a lot. I hate this, and I'm sorry if it's happening to you because there's not a lot you can do. Um, but what happens is that they get everybody riled up around them. So they make other people not like you, and they make other people perpetuate their own dirty work. And this can happen in, like I said, all relationships. So family members might turn against you, colleagues and coworkers, friend group. I mean, these people, difficult people, are very manipulative. And unfortunately, if you're not educated, then you're not going to recognize how the manipulation is happening to you and how you're getting roped in. You know what? It's also very possible that you could have been a flying monkey for a difficult person at one point. And again, let's just be compassionate. We didn't know what we know now. And so we're going to do better when we run into these people again, because we will, because it's life. So the being the victim of the flying monkeys is super shitty. It's hard. It's really hard. It's hurtful. And it feels like you're alone. This happened a little in my family dynamic with my ex-husband. He would like take my mom out to lunch and then just voice these bullshit concerns. And of course, you're coming across as like a kind, loving husband that just is worried and blah, blah, blah. And behind closed doors, it's like a very different situation. Um, there was physical abuse one time, and then there was breaking my cell phones. I had two phones that got broken all by him. He like slammed them on the ground and like completely destroyed them. And I was worried at one point that I wouldn't have resources or way to call anybody if I really needed help. So I ended up on a lunch break one day or something. I think it was my lunch break. I went to like T-Mobile and got a burner phone, one of those like prepaid ones. And I gave that number out to a select group of people. And I was like, never tell my husband that this is what I have. I need this for my own safety. So yeah, they might come across as like this kind, loving, compassionate person to other people because they're turning on the charm or whatever. And you're left like, what the fuck, feeling again like everybody's turning against you, but it's because they're not really seeing this person. They're not getting the experience that you're getting. So know that. Trauma bonding, very popular. When we have unhealed trauma in our attachments, we will find people that we trauma bond. So we have very similar attachment styles, like meaning if you are an anxious and they are an avoidant, you will find each other and they will keep hurting you. You will bond over your trauma, your unhealed trauma. Is exactly what it sounds like. So it's very addictive. What we often feel in trauma bonds is elated in the beginning. which I think is a sign. I think we need to really be mindful of that type of high energy, excitement. You're just lifted. It's different than the honeymoon phase that happens when we're just really like liking a person. Our brain is firing and you have like the giggles and you're like, oh my God, it's so fun, it's so cute, whatever. Personally, I find that to be a little uncomfortable, if I'm honest. I don't like it. And I think I love when things are just chill. So when I have a lot of excitement, I don't like it. I really don't, because I can be impulsive in my excitement. I've really had to learn to take excitement as to recognize it for what it is. It's just a very temporary feeling that does not mean I need to act from it at all. That's me. Other people are different. I'm just sharing my perspective, my experience here with excitement. But and because I've been hurt so many times from getting so excited, um, I've learned that that's probably not great for me to act from there and to create storylines from that excitement. Or I'll say to pay attention less to the storylines from the excitement. So, anyway, trauma bonding, you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. It's fast, it's intense, it's perfect, it's blah, 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 blah. And then you're like, oh God, it wears off very quickly as well. And then you're kind of left like, whoa, and coming out of the haze of the trauma bond and really seeing yourself, your unhealed attachment style coming into play. So if you're anxious, your anxiety is like tenfold. This could manifest as just like texting the person over and over again when you're not hearing um, anything from them in a 12-hour period, which is really normal. But if you're anxious and that person is avoidant, then these dynamics are being perpetuated. And this can be in friendships. It doesn't even have to be like in a romance. Could be with your boss, like you're an anxious person, your boss slightly avoidant, and then you're not hearing feedback. And so you're left to your own devices, which is dangerous because at that point you're not fully aware and healing. And so then the stories of this person hates me and I'm doing a bad job and I'm going to be fired all start to circulate. And then you're just kind of stuck in that state. So the trauma bonding, it's addictive. It's part of the addictive patterning that you have to learn how to step out of and change. It often feels familiar because it is. Attachment styles are formed within birth and 7 years of age. So they're familiar because they are what you grew up with. And great news is that you can change your attachment style with a lot of work. And I think that's very hopeful. You don't always have to be anxious, or you don't always have to let your anxiety move you, right? Influence behavior. Breadcrumbing. This is when a person is giving you a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And you're like, oh my God, they texted back. Oh my God, they recognized me for the effort that I put in and they gave me a little validation. And I've read a quote on this, which was really interesting, but it's that if you've never been fed love from a silver spoon, you'll learn to lick it off of a sharp knife. And we're going to be clear here, the breadcrumbing isn't even love, okay? What I mean by this is that you're so desperate, you're already in a dangerous place, you're willing to do even more dangerous things, stay and really um, pedestal and idealize the bare minimum. And this is a reflection of how starved you are for real connection that you will hold on to anything. And I've been there, so I don't want you to, I mean, if you feel bad, I can't stop that, but recognize that this is part of dealing with difficult people. You become so accustomed to the fact that the basic needs aren't going to be met that when something good happens, you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then you really become elated over the bare minimum. And then you're on a high from the bare minimum, and the fantasy part of you starts to kick in. Okay. And then you're like, maybe we're going to get back together. Maybe things are going to get back to the way that they were in the beginning, or maybe they've really changed and they're really seeing me and we're going to keep this up. And that is a fantasy. Like I said, it's not going to happen. Sorry, but it's not. You will soon be disappointed and really holding on to that one good moment. Then we have the devalue and discard. So, like I said, this happens after love bombing. This happens after they've gotten all the information they need from you to weaponize later. But they'll devalue. The love bombing will start to fade. So, there's less trips, there's less gifts, there's less whatever. And then there's more criticisms. They start to ramp up. It's the little digs over time. Um, like, yeah, I noticed that you gave that, but that, that speech or whatever. And yeah, I saw that the boss was like on his phone the whole time, so maybe he didn't like it. Or I noticed that you stuttered a lot in the presentation. So I mean it's good, but you stuttered a lot. Or a common one is, are you gonna wear that? Is that what you're gonna wear? Should you wear that? And this isn't coming from a person who's like, girl, that's not your best look. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not, because that is a genuine criticism. You don't want to go out of the house looking dumb. Like, of course, right? But it's insidious. It's way more insidious than that. It's like, maybe you can like lay off of the muffins, 'cause you're looking a little muffin choppy. Um, my ex-husband would make fun of my double chin, and I have a double chin. So here it is, like right there. For those of you on camera. And when I smile really big, like this, like a genuine smile, my face is a little more round. And so then the cheek puffs up a little bit and the face puffs up. And I have this like sometimes like double chin situation. And who fucking cares? Who fucking cares? Um, I don't care anymore. I used to. It used to be a point where I was like so sensitive about it and I would like be I would maybe even ashamed, I think, of like my face looking the way that it looked. Isn't that insane to say that right now? But because it was this um place of bullying where he would really bully me and be like, your face is doing that thing again, or like I think it also stems from when I was a kid and I was not performatively happy. And I think a lot of people go through this. Your parents are like, smile, or like, look happy. You're just told to put on that bullshit, fucking fake crap. And then I think it kind of comes from that. And then also, like, your face is going to get stuck like that. I don't know if anybody ever said that to you, but I had teachers say that to me. I had my parents say that to me. Or like if you're salty, and I have a very expressive face. For those of you who are watching me or follow me on Instagram and you've hopped on a live, if I don't like something, you're going to know. I mean, and there's no way of getting around it. So, can I also have a flat affect, which is no expression? Yeah, absolutely. But if I'm being genuine and authentic, you're going to know how I feel based on my facial expressions. It's no guessing. And so as a kid, I was very much like that. I didn't have to monitor myself and I learned how to because I got so much criticism from people about my facial expressions. They're offended by it, to which I say, fuck you. Well, I don't give a shit now as an adult. Like, if you don't like my face, then don't fucking look at it. But you can't say that when you're a kid. You don't have that power. In my case, I would have been beat or like put in my room. So anyway, it became this criticism of like my face or my body. A lot of body dysmorphia came up from that in the worst type of way. I was kind of chunky as a kid, so I was a little chunky as an adult, and that became a huge place of criticism and devaluing, as if my worth has anything to do with my body shape. It fucking doesn't. It doesn't, nor does yours. Your worth, your inherent lovability have absolutely nothing to do with whether you have a six pack or you have six rolls. Okay? You're fucking lovable and you are deserving of love. You are worthy of love and respect. I just had to say that. I'm very passionate about that. Anyway, the criticisms ramp up, and then we have the discarding. So, what happens here is that after you don't give them what they want, they're not getting that hit, that supply off you anymore. They're like, bye. If you're not married, then they just dump you. Excuse me. If you're a coworker and family member, you'll start to feel isolated. You might not get chosen for tasks and projects and things like that. Um, because you're not valuable, and not in the way that, like, again, your assets are being recognized, right? Like, if you have a strength, typically people are going to value you for that. And it's not about how you look, and it's not about the supply that you give other people because of that. That's not where your value lies, you know? And then lastly, we have word salad. I feel like the best example for word salad is just look up anything that Donald Trump says. That's word salad. It makes no fucking sense. And you're like, what happened? And this is also a way that you learn how to um, self silence. So you're asking your coworker, your partner, family member, whatever, hey, we need to talk about X, Y, and Z. And because they're so insecure, they can't have that direct conversation. You get a tangent that makes no goddamn sense and relates to nothing that you talked about. And it's 45 minutes later, and you're like, what just happened? You're exhausted. This person just went on and on and on. And you're like, okay, all right. We still need to talk about that. But here's the thing, you learn over time, because this is a tactic that they repeatedly use. You learn over time that it's going to be easier for you to just do it yourself than to expect them to engage with you because they're incapable, which is obvious. But please don't let yourself get roped into the word salad shit too much. You're never going to make sense of it. It's word vomit, really. But what happens is that you become analytical and you try to make sense of it, and then you think that's not going to happen again, and then again try to bring them into this conversation. It's probably some type of accountability that they're avoiding, and then you get the word salad, and then you're like, I don't understand. um Basically, like, you're never going to make sense of these people, and I know that's really hard to here, but it's also going to be where radical acceptance comes in. And you're like, wow, I don't understand that, I'm never going to. And that's what you need to hold yourself accountable for again and again, is accepting that they are illogical. Like, there's no logic, no sanity. It's what it is. So now we've gotten over quite a few things. We're an hour in. So this might be one of my longer podcast episodes, and feel free to take a break if you need to. But we've gone over the tactics, right? The classic difficult people and the tactics that they use. This is what makes them difficult. Now, I had mentioned at the beginning of the episode that no contact isn't always possible. And so, for those of you who have to co parent, work with, be in relationship with, even stay married to, like I said, not everybody has the option to get out, and that's okay. Um, So let's work with what we've got. It's not always possible to leave. It's not always possible to go no contact. If you can, I want you to recognize that is actually a luxury. Um, it can be really liberating. In the beginning, it's usually not, but it can be. It will be over time. I promise you. I don't make a lot of promises, but that is something I can promise because anything is better than being abused. Um, so, oh, you can see the dog. I don't know if you can hear him, but one question I get asked a lot when I'm working with clients is, can I make this work? Can it work with this difficult person? And the answer depends. So there's no black and white, because people are not black and white. There's so many shades of possibility here. So let's lean into that. Yes, it can work, but you have to accept that the relationship isn't going to give you what a healthy relationship is designed to give you. So, again, if you can just recognize that this relationship is unhealthy, um, and that this person isn't going to change and they're always going to be difficult, then it can work because you can learn how to be in a relationship. You can learn how to drop your expectations and how to move on, right? To have them in your life and not get so roped into the bullshit. So yes, in that way it can work, but if what you mean by work, if your definition of work is to have them all of a sudden turn around and be like a kind, loving, compassionate partner that's listening, where you're finding some emotional fulfillment in the relationship and you're no, that's not going to happen. So you need to again step into radical acceptance. And here's the thing, we don't always want to break off our relationships with people because sometimes we just don't. It could be a sibling and maybe they're not so incredibly they're not using all of these tactics. They're not marking off all of the qualifiers for narcissism or difficult people, but those traits are there. They flare up and things aren't always great. You can choose to have them at an arm's length. And again, if you recognize that this can be a surface level relationship, and that is what it is, there's a place for that. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with you having them in your life. And that's it, you know? So, yes, you can work it, but it's always going to be surface level. So, you need to go into it realizing that. And what also needs to happen on your end of things is that you need to find happiness and fulfillment outside of the relationship. That's going to be really important because it's going to counterbalance the fact that this isn't that great. So, be it a boss, coworker, partner, family member, whatever. Um, there's some grieving usually that happens here because we might look at other people and we might look at how they have a healthy relationship with their parent, boss, whatever, and we could desire that and we don't have that. And so we can radically accept our space and we can also say, okay, I have grieving to do. And also, I have other things that bring me joy and fulfillment, right? We don't want to just sit there and act like there isn't ways that we can be fulfilled in our life. We really want to create happiness for ourselves. So let's get into the 10 ways to be resistant to these tactics. And this actually comes from some of my own experience. This comes from a combination of the knowledge that I've learned over time. And then there's a really cool lady on YouTube. Her name is Dr. Ramani, and she has an entire her life's work is dedicated to dealing with specifically narcissists and psychopaths. Because there's a lot of people out there that do deal with them. They have to. But anyway, this is all a combination of stuff from her and mine and life and school and all the things. So you have to learn how to not be gaslit. And the best way that you can do this is to learn how to validate yourself and to stop the internal gaslighting. So, this comes with practice over time. You learn how to just say, like, no, that did happen. I did hear that. I do feel this way, and you can't tell me differently. And even something you can use in relation with difficult people when you start to get gaslit is, we could remember this differently, but my feelings are my feelings, right? Because they're going to try to talk you out of how you feel or minimize your feelings or tell you that you shouldn't feel that way. And I think it's also really important as a parent to listen to how your kids are feeling and to get curious about why your little one or teenager or whatever might be feeling that way, is feeling that way, and help them evolve their emotional literacy. And you do that through listening and through becoming aware of what your own internal feeling state is. When you're good at this, you become impossible to gaslight because you're not questioning yourself. You're not questioning what you said. You're not questioning the reality. And you're like, cool, well, we remember this differently. I remember it this way, you remember it that way, and this is how I'm feeling. It's a fact. Let's move on. And so, really being able to own your experience and be authentic is you won't be able to be gaslit. Huge learning curve. Let's stop putting people on a pedestal, the halo effect. That's a huge thing. So this falls under a couple things here, but like we put charming and charismatic people on we give them the halo, we're like, oh my God, they're so amazing. They're such a good speaker. They're so um, smart or whatever. And let's be real. Mm, just because you have the woo factor doesn't mean you're a good person. So the charm, the charisma, this comes in often as the friend, the probably see this a lot in like partnerships, but like or the boss or the partnerships, and they're like, oh my God, again, like they just ooze this like confidence and whatever. And confidence is great, but then there's this overly charismatic person. And oftentimes people lean into that and they become vulnerable. And I'm not saying that people can't be likable. We want likable people, absolutely. But it becomes this thing where they're like schmoozing and wooing, and you're just kind of caught up in all of it, I'm sure you know. The other thing that happens in the charm and charisma is that they flatter you and you become susceptible to flattery. Look, if you can clock flattery for what it is, that's fine. It's a way for people to try to get something out of you, which is whatever. They want to leave you in a certain emotional state so that they can exploit you. You can't be exploited if you recognize that the flattery is happening. And you're allowed to like flatter people. You're allowed to feel good because you're being flattered. But again, when you recognize it for what it is, you can clock it and be like, oh my, you can even make jokes about it and be like, you old flatterer, you, and oh, you're just buttering me up. What do you want? And sometimes it's harmless, sometimes it's insidious. So just be mindful. So making really intelligent people, um, again, giving the halo effect to super smart people. I've been guilty of this. I love very intelligent people. And sometimes that's been to my detriment where I'm like, oh my God, they're so smart. And I just become a little blindsided to their other negative qualities. So that'll be an important thing for you to check in with because you're going to be resistant to a person that happens to be really well educated, but is also a difficult person. Because what can happen is they'll start like I think about a lawyer, and I'm so sorry if you're a lawyer. This isn't like to say that you are a difficult person, and I know that you know that. But I do. My example is a lawyer, because then they'll start to use their jargon against you, and then you'll start to gaslight yourself again and be like, "Well, they're so smart; they must know what they're talking about." I think about this too with like leadership roles. I think about this with like religious leaders, spiritual leaders, all of it, where it's, I'm so smart. I know the guru. There we go. That's what I was looking for. And because I know more than you, I need you to just listen and then do. So there's the compliance aspect. And don't really question it, just kind of do it. And that is dangerous, very dangerous. So being successful, again, if you're a successful person, doesn't mean you're a good person. So let's not equate those two things together. Being wealthy, some people are actually very distrustful of wealthy people, but then some people are like, "Oh, you're rich. You must be doing something right." And then again, they give the halo effect on that. Another thing to do is observe how they treat people. This is interesting because I can give you some clear examples. My ex-husband would make fun of strangers, and I dismissed it at first as him just being like a funny guy, like a comedian funny guy. And I really didn't see that it was fucked up. And so there would just be these comments and digs on strangers, like, let's say we're people watching, and instead of creating maybe like a funny story about a person, which is fine, I think it's not a problem when you people watch, you might wonder like, why are they behaving like that or the outfit or whatever. And I think it's human nature to get curious and to be funny and silly. But instead of the funny silliness, it was more of the like, oh God, like, why would they choose that? They look ridiculous, blah, blah, blah. And just like a lot of criticism. Um, that was behavior I actually really did notice in the beginning, but I dismissed it because I wasn't willing to accept that it was a red flag. I was really just, again, partly naive, partly intentionally, um, well, I was codependent. So some in that there's this a lot. Anyway, I admit to that. So it wasn't my best. Because there was a lot of all the other things. And I was like, well, let me just like lean into those, right? The trips. This person's so good in so many other ways. I get such good treatment from them. So, surely they can have this fault, but it's a pretty big red flag. So their treatment of other people, this could be, how they talk to other people, how they talk about other people in front of them or when they're not around, um, and how they talk to people that are like in retail, that's an important thing. Wait staff, if someone's condescending to people in those roles, then you start to really see how that the better than, the smugness, the you're lesser than, I'm more superior, all that's really connected to that. Um, yeah, difficult people have like their own ticks and um their own ways of like being dismissive, of creating arguments, like again, going up to the tactics that we went over, those are all tells of the difficult person. And so the better you can identify those things, the less susceptible you'll be to getting roped in. Being really good about setting boundaries. Authentic people, healthy people will set boundaries and they don't waver on them. So if your boundaries are disorganized, if they're flexible, too flexible for these difficult people, you will become a doormat. You will become a punching bag because they'll be like, well, you're not serious. So whatever, I can walk all over you. Enabling them, that's what I was doing with my ex-husband. So I was tolerant of the behavior. I stayed silent for a lot of it, and that was enabling. And then also cutting out people that enable other people like that is going to be important. And unfortunately, a lot of people enable for some of your friends and family members. You might be able to educate them, and the behavior of enabling may stop. However, let's not be too hopeful. Let's be realistic. Change is hard. Most people don't want to do it. Most people aren't going to stop, and most people are going to enable. So then you get to stop. Like it still comes down to you at the end of the day. Second chances, let's not. Some things are what they are. Especially if it's a physical abuse situation and just a deeply emotional, psychological, abusive tactic, that shit ain't gonna stop. Second chances are not deserved. Don't. Because they become thirds and fourths and fifths. And then it's 5 years later. Nope. Don't do it. In our culture of everybody gets a second chance and we should forgive and you should be quick to forgive and you should listen and blah, blah, blah. Nope, I'm actually pretty cynical when it comes to that. And I'm not saying that you don't have people that you can't repair things with, but that relationship has been established as healthy. This is not what I'm talking about. Okay. This relationship for giving second chances is proven up to this point that you don't know them, that they're not trustworthy, they talk shit about people, that they're slightly manipulative, that they have a superiority complex. Don't give that person a second chance. Cut them out or put them at an arm's length. And lastly, surround yourself with good people because you deserve to be surrounded by good people. Good people will help you if you're a little weak and new at identifying difficult people. If you might be overly empathetic and kind of talking yourself into giving them a second chance. You might need a girlfriend who's like, for what? You don't remember? You don't remember how they talked to you last time? You don't remember how things ended, girl? You don't remember that they did X, Y, and Z, and you were like, oh, yeah. And then you need somebody to be like, why are you thinking about giving them a second chance? And you can be like, why am I doing that? And really unpack that. So you need good people. You deserve good people. So when you have this education, you are much closer to safety than you think because you'll start to recognize, oh my God, it's happening, it's unfolding, and I can just kind of step away. Enabling keeps people in their patterns, and that's why we don't want to do it. If they're abusive, they're going to stay abusive. Staying silent is part of that. It's enabling. Um, One other thing I see, and I've worked with this a lot in clients, there's no consequence for somebody's abusive behavior or really difficult behavior. And I say, what? So you've been dealing with this for a while. Let's talk about boundaries. In boundary setting is a consequence. What is the consequence of them treating you like that? And I will, more often than not, the client will look at me and say, like, huh, I don't know. That is a huge sign for you that you need to do some work. Not having a consequence, I mean, why the fuck would they care? Why would anybody care if you don't give them a consequence? There's nothing for them to change. You getting mad, you getting sad, that's not a fucking consequence to them. They don't give a shit about your feelings. So why the fuck do they care that you keep getting upset? That's on you. That's literally how they're looking at it. And to some degree, as a support, it's how I'm looking at it. It's not good enough. That's not a good enough consequence because they're not feeling your feelings. Only you are. So if you don't want to feel this way, how are you going to not? What barriers do you need to put in place? What natural consequences do you need to have set up for them? It could be that you don't have time with them. It could be that I think that spending less time is usually a consequence, a go-to consequence, but it's like you just disengage, um, that you walk away, which is part of disengaging. It's that you are going to have to let people know their behavior. It's a consequence. You're going to say, like, I'm going to actually tell people that you're doing this if you continue to treat me this way because I need support and this isn't working. So yeah, letting people know what the consequences, like with a kid, right? They don't get to do things and be like consequence free. There's a natural consequence to the behavior, especially if you're being triggered constantly. You staying and facing it isn't, you don't get brownie points for that. There's no thing in the afterlife that's like, cool, congratulations. Here's your murder trophy. Like, you don't fucking get that shit. So please don't. Appeasing and placating. Sometimes this works. It depends on the person. And in part of, again, making the relationship work. Some people do choose to placate their partner. That is completely dependent on you. And also your support system. Sometimes the placating with radical acceptance can be okay. Um, your needs aren't being met in that situation at all, and you may need to stabilize elsewhere, and meet the needs elsewhere. So that's okay if that's what you want. But recognizing like it is enabling behavior is fine too, as long as you have the awareness. So there's a couple of other things here. Two things are really important. One of them is being a gray rock, and the other one is having a firewall. And these are two really powerful techniques that will help you work with difficult people. When I had spoken about not giving away too much information, that's actually the gray rock. You are boring on purpose. You're not telling people anything about you that is soul level information. You're talking about the weather, you're talking about the football game, I'm talking about your favorite food. So basically, you're keeping things surface level. If they probe, meaning they inquire more from you and they ask for these stories, again, they're data mining. You're just like, I don't really know. I've never thought about it before. Or like, yeah, I don't know. I'll have to think about it and get back to you, to which you never do. Again, you don't owe difficult people anything, certainly not the truth. And so if you want to tell them a lie, that's also fine. It's not a big deal. It's really not. But you're boring on purpose. You're not engaging, you're not arguing. Um, you're not sharing your desires, your goals, none of that, because it's all going to be used against you. It's all going to be sabotaged at some point. So you're not going to do it. You're not going to set yourself up for that. Firewall. Excuse me. The firewall. Well, this is part of what we're doing. You're creating a really strong firewall here today because you are being educated, and that's how you can be safe. You can prevent yourself from getting roped into those tactics by recognizing what they are. So, right, you're not letting that bullshit in. You have a wall of protection up. You're not giving away anything that can be used against you. So there's this technique called the DEEP technique. It's DEEP. And what this means is don't defend, don't engage, don't explain, and don't personalize. People like this, because difficult people are difficult, everybody, most people find them difficult. If not now, they will at some point in time. Um, if not in this situation, historically, most people have found them difficult. And, if it's a new coworker, it's not like you get to do research on them, and like find everybody they've dated and talk to their parents about how they were as a kid. Like, you don't get that. So at some point, people will become frustrated. Not always, though. So, if you are the only one who finds them immediately frustrating or frustrating at some point in time, don't personalize it. Just recognize like difficult people are just that. People find them difficult. All right, we're going to wrap up. Yeah, we're in an hour and a half. This is a long episode. So thank you for riding it out with me. I appreciate you being here. I honestly feel like we've been in a session together. For your healing, this is what we're going to wrap up with. As I was talking to my partner about this episode and writing the script for it, I was like, "Hey, what would you have needed to hear in order to help yourself with difficult people?" And I loved what he said. I really did, because it touched me, because I need this type of reflection. And so I hope that it touches you as well and helps you find some levity. But in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter. And I'm one of those people where I don't think anything matters. I really lean heavy into chaos. I mean, is the work I'm doing here, does it matter? Not really. I mean, is it going to impact you possibly through your life and help you live better? Yes. So in that way, it matters. But in the grand scheme of things, in the entirety of human existence and this fucking bullshit life, like, nah, it doesn't fucking matter. You know what I mean? So in that way, like, it doesn't matter. These difficult people don't fucking matter. And the other thing is, because you don't matter to them, they don't give a fuck about you. Why do you care so much about them? Really, really, really consider that. Really take that in. Why the fuck do you care about difficult people? Why the fuck do you care? They don't give a shit about your fucking feelings, babe. They do not give a fuck. Care about things that matter to you. It's certainly not difficult people. You don't have to forgive. I know this is a fucking hot topic, but in the spiritual world, we love this whole like, just forgive them, show them kindness, show them love. You can shove the forgiveness up their ass and tell them to fuck off, and you're still a good person. Um, Forgiveness isn't it, we make it a virtuous act, but it's not something you have to do to move forward. It's not something you have to do to heal. This is a radical concept, actually, because I think from the spiritual thing, there's like the religious underpinnings. And so you make forgiveness like a virtuous thing. And like, fuck that shit. When this person comes up in your mind, part of your healing is you're less triggered as time goes on. I can talk about my relationship, my ex-husband, I can talk about it now and be way less triggered emotionally, mentally, physically, right? Because trauma gets held in our body. And if you had said my ex-husband's name, or when I was going through the divorce process and I was reading emails, I would get like jostled. Like it would take me out of a calm state and put me into a fight, flight, freeze state, fawn state, hypervigilance. And so I don't have that now, like if I see photos they've surfaced over the years, I can look at them and be like, wow, he's probably still a piece of shit. And I'm gonna go on about my day and just keep it moving. I'm not ruminating. That's another sign that you're healing. And in order to detach from the rumination, from telling yourself the story, from trying to figure out why, in understanding, from putting the pieces together, replaying things over and over, to do less of that, you need to throw yourself, and I mean throw yourself into anything that you want to learn about. It's going to be good for you. But anyway, you don't have to forgive. You can learn how to let go as time goes on. You can learn how to. I think the letting go is completely fine. It's good enough. Trust me. Um, Grieve however the fuck you want, however long you need to, about whatever the fuck you need to grieve. Because honestly, your relationship and surviving a relationship with a difficult person is unique. It's going to bring up a lot of grief. I grieved that I didn't really, I don't want to say didn't have a marriage. I did, but I didn't really have a partnership like I thought. It was full of pain and confusion. And yeah, there was grieving around that, that I felt kind of cheated. Like I didn't get what I wanted. I didn't get what I signed up for. There's a lot of grief. And time spent on a relationship that was super crappy. Um, Grieving the loss of some of my identity as well. It's really interesting. So yeah, grieve whatever you need to for however long you need to. Another thing that becomes complex in the healing is that you do also have good times with difficult people. You have good moments, as I said, they might be part of the breadcrumbing, but they're still having that word of affirmation or that vacation or that dinner that things went well and things were good. It's still part of the memory. It's still an experience you had. And so there can sometimes be in the healing process like that it needs to be all or nothing, that like you need to remember everything horrible, and that if you remember something good, it's a slippery slope because then you can start to have that pull to go back. And I really want to validate that. I want to let you know that that's really normal. At the same time, you need to be grounded and you need to have a person or people hold you accountable. And I'm here to do that. I'm here to say you can have those moments of missing them. You can miss toxic people. You can miss super shitty, abusive people. You're not wrong. It's probably really confusing for people who are not on the inside of that experience and like, fuck them, they don't get it. But you can miss them. You can give yourself permission to miss them. You can miss the laughter. You can miss the bonding moments that you had, surface level or not. You can miss them. It's okay. It's what you do with that that's important. And that's part of your healing. It's just kind of sitting in the discomfort. And you can miss your parents if they were abusive. You can miss your siblings, like all of it. You can miss them. You can have those moments. They are yours. And it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean you're wrong. It doesn't mean you're bad. It doesn't mean you shouldn't miss them. If you that's what you're feeling, that's what you're feeling. And you can cherish those moments that were good. You absolutely can. If they bring a smile to your face, if they bring some relief to your chest and you drop your shoulders, then that's fine. It's okay. Remember that choosing yourself, even if it's choosing the discomfort to walk through all of this healing, which is very uncomfortable, it's better than being enmeshed, being overly involved and overly emotionally tied in with the difficult person or people. It is better than that. Um, I think for a lot of people, you might learn how to be alone for the first time. So it could be you're leaving your toxic family members and you're having life on your own. You're leaving a spouse and navigating the world as a single person. Um, it's very scary. I would like to say that. I was deathly afraid, like so fucking scared, but I needed to do it. I did it, and here I am. I'm very glad I did. I think that's what most people will say. And then focus on your own things. Like I said, over time, you're going to think less about the difficult person. You're going to ruminate less. You're going to really lean into the things that excite you. And what's exciting to you doesn't have to be exciting to other people. So please don't let other people dictate what you should find interesting at this stage of healing in your life. I threw myself into tarot, and that really worked in my favor. But I also got into painting. I don't know if I've always painted, but I really just went in with it. I bought a bunch of paint and shit and canvases and just was like, even if I don't feel like it, I'm gonna paint, and kind of held myself to that. I joined some tarot meetup groups, so that's a great way to meet people. I started reading a lot more. Books for pleasure, books for enjoyment, not books for school. I was actually getting a divorce while I was in grad school, so it was incredibly challenging. But yeah, I found time. I made time to do all the things I wanted to do. Talk about this with trusted people. Processing is really important. I say trusted people because when you go to some people, especially if they've never been a victim of relationships with difficult people, they're not going to be able to relate to you in a way that you're really desiring. And so my hope for you is that you find people that you can relate with, that will listen to you, that will validate you, and that will support you. There's nothing more complex than coming out of the the haze and the confusion of an abusive relationship, really, the difficult relationship. It's incredible, and you're incredible for coming out of it, right? For recognizing it for what it is. But you're left with a lot of feelings. Most of them are not good. You typically have relief, right? There's this, your chest is a little more open, but there are many days that are confusing still because you're reorganizing your internal sense of self, and you might not know fully who you are because you've been told that you're somebody else, or you've been minimizing your needs for so long, like you don't realize that what are your needs. You might even struggle to sort of sit and say like, oh my god, I have needs, like what could they be right now? um and this is a part of your healing, is recognizing you do have needs, and you can take however long you need to identify what you need to feel your feelings. It's not uncommon that you have great days and you're like, I did this shit. I'm making distance, and I'm not a victim anymore. I'm not falling for their bullshit. And then the next day you're like, I'm freaking out. It's like, fine. It's part of it. Healing isn't linear. So it's not going to be like one day you have this step and the next day you should feel the same. That's not it. If you can, again, open up to radical acceptance of how you feel, you're healing because you're validating yourself. You're not gaslighting yourself and saying, I should feel differently because yesterday I felt one way, today I should feel another. You're going to quickly see how you have internalized some of these patterns, and you get to release them. And I'm here for you. And lastly, in talking about it with trusted people, it is that I am here for you. Please don't hesitate to book a session, even if you need me to listen, if you need me to be that sounding board, if you need me to validate. I'm absolutely here for that. Some of the biggest and most transformational moments with my clients have been when I have recognized that they are being abused. And I'm saying, wow, holy shit, you're a survivor. And I recognize literally just that. Like I recognize the abuse that you've gone through. And I'm here for you. And I would love to help you unpack this. And I would love to help you navigate this and give you the tools and the resources to cope as you fully reclaim yourself and your power. And sometimes it's also recognizing that you can't just close the door. And so I'm here to listen as you are in this relationship with your difficult partner and how, yeah, you guys had a really great dinner out. And then all of a sudden they turned around and they were a fucking asshole and they're a fucking asshole. And let's talk about it because here's the thing with some difficult people, the charade, I don't know if that's right. Yeah, charade. The mask is people see the mask. They see how kind they are, how nice they are, how giving. And you're behind closed doors and you're like, this motherfucker. And you can't take that to everybody, but that's what I'm here for. I'm the person that you can take it to because, like, that's what I do. So, anyway, please don't hesitate to book a session. I love you. I hope that this gives you some support. I hope that this at least brings you some comfort in recognizing that I've been through it, so I can help you. I'll do my best anyway, and that these tactics are ones that you don't have to fall for. And the better educated you become, the more strong you'll be. So the less vulnerable you'll be to these tactics. And be boring around these people. Not everybody deserves you, babe. Not everybody deserves you. It is a fucking fact. And if you've dealt with difficult people, if you've been a victim of abuse because of difficult people, you certainly know how wonderful you are and how undeserving they were of your love and your attention and your goodness. But yeah, the good news is you get to bring that to people. There's 8 billion people in the world and they're not all bad. And so some people are going to experience you and love you and cherish you like you should be cherished and loved and respected. So, um, yeah, we're going to sign off. I'm going to sign off on that note, on that long note, 2 hours, you guys. So I love you. I love you. I love you. And I will talk to you soon. Okay. Bye.